Right, welcome back to the second GeogPod of UK in the 21st century. I'm joined with Mr. Candle again, and we're going to get started straight away. And this time, we're going to start with looking at ethnic diversity in the UK. So, the UK is a very ethnically diverse nation. 13% of the population in the UK were born in another country, a bit like me, sir. Um, in London, particularly, this is a place that has 37% of people born in another nation. So they are not born in the UK themselves. And this has led to massive changes in the different types of ethnicities we have in the UK and in London, particularly, such as we don't just have white British anymore, we've got non-white British, we've got Black African, we've got Asian, and so on. So what we're saying is that the UK has changed massively in terms of its ethnic diversity over particularly the last 70 years or so as transport around the world has increased. Any
I'd
questions, sir?
agree, sir. I grew
Yeah.
up in Birmingham, and I loved it. I love being able to growing up with different cultures. We used to be able to. I used to go to school in a city, and in every class, there'd be a real range of different people from different nationalities, and it's really good because we began. That was normal to me, and we used to celebrate different kind of celebrations with different people from different cultures, and I think it added an awful lot up onto me and my family. So it's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have to be honest, I had a very different experience as a child myself. So where I grew up in Ireland was not very ethnically diverse at all. It's only in the last 10 years or so where Ireland's become much more ethnically diverse and it's becoming more and more like the UK with different ethnicities, backgrounds, cultures, religions, and so on. And I think it is a real benefit to people and their own development and their own understanding of different people around the world. So what we're going to look at now is how the UK has what's called an aging population. And what that means is more and more people are living longer and longer. They're getting into the elderly age bracket. And so around 18% of people in the UK are over 65. And so this is a rising trend. This is actually growing. And where older people mainly live is coastal areas, especially in the east and southwest. So especially in places like Norfolk and other places such as Cornwall and Devon in the
I'd
southwest.
like to do that, sir. I think if I retire, I've been living in Birmingham, which is really busy. Where we live now is a little bit more up in the countryside. But as I retire, as if I've worked hard all my life, I want some peace and quiet. And I want to be able to get out and I want to be able to do things. And often that's the pattern what everybody does. So
Yeah.
and everyone wants to get a house near the coastline, but a lot of the issues are there is people who are often making loads of money in London, they often look to buy a kind of second home. So if I'm looking to be able to buy an actual property out there, and other people are looking to buy a kind of second property, all the prices are going to go up.
Yeah, exactly. They are. And I agree with you. I'd like to. So you're nowhere near retirement, so you're all right. You don't have to think about this for a long time. And nor am I. But I agree with you. People generally, when they get older, they want to live somewhere that's less fast paced. They want to live somewhere where they can get to know their community a bit better, where there's less people, and generally where it's more relaxing. So essentially, what we need to look at here for the aging population, and we're going to break it down into really simple points, is what causes it, what are the impacts or effects of it, and what's the response to it. So how do we respond to these problems? So what causes the aging population? Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, what are called baby boomers. And these are people who were born in a time where there was a very high birth rate. So just after World War II, for example, those people who were born in the 1950s, let's say, and the late 1940s, there was a birth rate increase at that time. And therefore, They are known as the baby boomers. There was an influx, a large amount of people born during that period. And so they're moving into old age now, or are in old age now. And there's quite a large population of them. We've
So,
also got, go on, sir.
sorry, are we going to see lockdown baby boomers? What do you reckon to that theory?
We could see lockdown baby boomers. It depends. We don't know yet. We'll have to wait for a few years and find out. But there is a potential for that. And that will then create an even higher aging population in, let's say, 70 years' time, 60 or 70 years'
Exactly.
time. Yeah. So this is going to be an ongoing problem in the future. And the thing is, as well, we have improved healthcare, don't we, today? So more people are able to be treated for illnesses that previously they might not have been. So people are living longer lives because they're getting better healthcare treatments with the NHS. And also, there is much more awareness today of good diets and exercise and healthy living. And that increases people's quality of life, and therefore it helps them live longer too. And so they are the reasons why we have an aging population. But when we have this happening, we need to think about the impacts, both positive and negative, of an aging population. And so there are things like we have to spend more on healthcare because there are more people being treated, particularly aging people. We also have a shortage of places in care homes. So people who live till, let's say, 90, 95, 100 may not be able to care for themselves when they get to that age and may need someone to care for them. So they will move into care homes. However, the limited supply of care homes and the amount of space care homes have to take more people mean that we need to spend more and more on those care homes to care for the increasing amount of people who are older. And finally, one last impact of an aging population is that many older people actually in their retirement, maybe with their pensions, will spend what's called the grey pound. So it's linked to people with grey hair. And essentially, what this is when people who are older spend money on traveling, they spend money in the local economy, they join clubs that go out, for example, for a day on excursions, which is tourism. And that is called the grey pound, where elderly people spend money in the economy, which boosts that local economy. So
So
that's
does
the
that mean as well, so that I'm going to have to be able to probably be able to pay more up into my pension because people who are obviously living longer, they're going to have their pensions for longer as well.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So, and that's one of the kind of responses the government has taken to try and boost pension pots and boost pension amounts overall. So, the government, for example, has encouraged older people to save money for the future, but it's also increased the amount that people today who work, who are between the ages of 18 and let's say 65, we pay more for towards pensions and pay more national insurance contributions to be able to provide older people with a good standard of living in future. And also, that means that pensioners and the government has had to make sure that pensioners receive better pensions, better transport facilities, more heating allowance to heat their homes. And also, what's happened is we've, as a nation, allowed more immigration over the past 20 years, particularly because we have a rising demand in our economy for younger workers. Because there is an aging population, there is slightly less young people, and therefore we need to get more young people from abroad to do the jobs like caring for elderly people that need to be done. Any questions, sir?
I think where you're just about to go to is what happened in Birmingham after Second World War. You know, perhaps the area of actually Birmingham was quite into building cars and producing cars, and that is a kind of secondary industry, really. So that's where we need loads of people to come and work in these kind of areas up in the factories, and the pay wasn't an issue then. So we could be able to bring in loads of people to work in all the factories that need all the car parts, and then we could be able to sell them off as an actual profit. But Now we don't be able to make that many cars in the UK anymore because all the costs are rising and rising and rising. If you think about the minimum wage, over here, that would actually be able to mean that at the end, the actual overall cost of an individual car would be massive. We might as well make it elsewhere and then just bring it in here. That'd be much cheaper.
Yeah, definitely. And that's called deindustrialization. What you've just explained basically is how industry has moved further and further away from the UK over the last 50 years, but in the last 20 years, particularly because of the rising costs of actually creating and making cars and building them, and the workforce costs and the minimum wage being high. And so, what you've got on screen actually is essentially a roundup of what the UK employment sector looks like. And what we can see is exactly that industry. So, car making, for example, falling over time between 2001 and 11 by 10%. And that's because those industries are moving towards places like South Korea and China and South America because it is cheaper to employ people there. It's also cheaper to manufacture goods there and create these cars. And so, what we've seen in the UK over time essentially is we have become a service driven economy. So, we have become a tertiary economy. And what that means is things like shops, teachers, healthcare workers, and so on. There is more of them and more people training to work in those industries than there are in agriculture or manufacturing. And we've also got one more industry that's not actually mentioned on here, but that is the quaternary industry. And that's people who work in sophisticated IT jobs, and that's growing in the UK. As we've got better technology, there's more and more people in the UK working in high skilled IT jobs who are graduating from university. And that is a response, if you like, to industry falling and the need to find other ways in which employment is made and other ways in which people earn money. Any questions on that, sir?
I think that the quaternary industry is making us, as a country and actually different areas of our country, of the UK, really important in the
Yeah,
whole world. I mean, like if we talk about if we go to Cambridge, obviously there's the wonderful university there, but everyone wants to go to Cambridge because they go to university and they can become experts in their little fields, and as an economic hub, we get a large amount of international students who want to go to Cambridge University. It's a world leading university. And then all the businesses who are wanting to be able to move actually forward in IT or in research or in media or in computer games, uh, they look to be able to base their companies in around Cambridge because they've got experts right on their doorstep. And if they want to be able to develop anything, they go to Cambridge University with an idea and some money, and they say, "Could you do some work on this to try and make us it even better?" And as Cambridge is a perfect place to be able to build these new businesses.
yeah, absolutely. I agree. And Cambridge, incidentally, is one of the case studies for this topic in the sense that it is one of those places in the UK that has a really high skilled population because of its university, is a world science leader, and also is one of those places where those quaternary jobs, those highly skilled jobs, are growing. And what you need to know about Cambridge is how significant it is to the UK, why it's important, and what its advantages and disadvantages are as a business location. And so let's just quickly think about Cambridge then. It's an education hotspot. It's got 14 different billion-dollar companies currently. So they are very large companies who bring in lots of revenue to the UK, very important tax for the UK economy. It's one of those places as well where average incomes from people, so their pay packets and their wages are around 34% higher than the national average. So people earn lots of money. who work in Cambridge because of these high skilled jobs. It's one of the places also that makes what's called a net contribution to the UK economy. And what that means is it earns more than it costs, right? So it earns money and much more than what's spent on it. And finally, another significant thing about Cambridge is that there are around 4,000 knowledge intensive companies there. So they are those companies that we're talking about in the quaternary sector who are very knowledge heavy and are very research heavy.
How about is companies like maybe Microsoft work there? Apple have got offices there. Or who else? There's loads of them.
Yeah, there's loads of companies that we are well akin to. I think also, sir, I might be right in saying that we're currently in the coronavirus pandemic, and one of the companies that is working on the vaccine is based in Cambridge as well. Is that correct, sir?
Yeah, it is. I know that there's been a lot of press about Oxford University, but Cambridge University are leading on many other little kind of projects like this, and because of that actual sort of reputation, that actual individual pool, you get an awful lot of people coming over from China, Japan. They all want to be able to come to Cambridge University, and then often they be able to stay in that area after they finish their universities. So this is having a negative impact because all the house prices up in Cambridge are going up and up and up.
Yeah, exactly. The more demand there is from people for housing, the more demand there is from international students, the more that's spent in the local economy, generally you find the house prices increase. And actually, that is one of the problems of using Cambridge as a place of significance, and one of the disadvantages of it. One of the things is that because house prices are so high, because it's such an important area and it's very attractive to people, it's very actually hard to live there unless you earn a really good wage. And that's one of the disadvantages of Cambridge as a business hub. People tend to get their university degree, and if they don't really get a job in Cambridge, they might move outside of Cambridge elsewhere where it's cheaper to live. And the other main disadvantage of Cambridge in that sense, therefore, is that rental costs, which people from university tend to rent after they leave university because they might not be able to afford to buy a house. Those rental costs are high. But there are advantages too to Cambridge, as Sir mentioned. So it's got a highly skilled workforce. It's really, really located on excellent routes. So, for example, the M11, the A1 to London. It's close to Birmingham. It's very easy to get to Birmingham from Cambridge. It's got a large science park that we mentioned before. So those businesses are developing all of the time, and they've got that highly skilled workforce to be able to develop their initiatives. Anything else to add to that, sir?
Obviously, I went there as well, so it's brilliant. But apart from that, there are just loads of computer games being kind of made over there, and I think during this actual lockdown period as well, people are just spending more and more money on these kind of computer games, and they're becoming more and more actual complex, and that's going to bring more money into the country. So that's a good thing, right? So over time, the UK used to be able to run the Commonwealth, which had, our British Empire, which used to be able to cover a lot of the world. But over time, we've often given back individual countries their independence. So, and our army is probably not as actual big as it used to be. Are we losing power in the world or not?
So that's an interesting question. It depends on your viewpoint, but if you look at the evidence, I would say that we've got more soft power than we've ever had. And that essentially means more political, persuasive power. Yes, the UK obviously was the helm of the British Empire, and it controlled lots of places around the world, such as Palestine, such as many, many African nations, the 54 African nations. There are many of those nations were controlled by British rule. And so the UK in the past has been very, very persuasive and very powerful, but we have lost some of that power in the sense of territory, so land control. But we've also kept quite a lot of power in terms of political will and also political influence. So what we're going to do is just quickly look at UK's role in the Middle East. So, as I said before, the UK and the British Empire was involved in places such as Palestine and decision making for borders in nations. And we also use Palestine and most of the Middle East as a very powerful way in which to trade oil with, because those countries are very rich in oil and gas. And also, we trade with them, we export to those nations things like military hardware, so military weapons. Now, in recent times, the UK has mainly been involved in things like NATO, which is up here. So that is the North Atlantic trade, the North Atlantic Agreement on what happens with political weapons and things like that, and it kind of is involved in peace. But the UK's involvement, particularly recently in Syria, we supported the involved military action that we've taken place in Syria in 2015, and also the famous one of Iraq in 2003. We're also part of the peacekeeping missions and the training to keep peace within the Middle East, in Iraq, for example, and in Syria. Now, when we think about the UK's kind of influence in the world, as Sir mentioned, we have to think about our media. So Sir mentioned, for example, gaming and how we are exporting that from places like Cambridge all around the world. But there are other ways in which we are really, really influential, like films and TV and music and books. And this is all worth around £17 billion to the UK economy. And an example of that is, for example, Harry Potter, which was really influential all around the world and sold in 200 different nations. So our media, our English language, our fashion, our style, the way in which we live our lives is really influential around the world. And therefore, what we've actually got is what's called a multicultural UK. Going back to what Sir said earlier about Birmingham being very multicultural, we have managed to both export and import different ways of life in terms of fashion, what we dress, our dress senses, our hairstyles. We've managed to also export our media, and also we're aware of different media like Bollywood movies. And also, finally, we've managed to import a lot of different types of food. So we have Chinese takeaways, we have pizza, we have Indian takeaways. We cook different types of meals that are usually cooked around the world in different areas, but we have known and considered them to be also UK types of food because of the way in which they have been imported into the UK. So, anything to add or any questions on any of that?
Yeah, I think we put our own little twists onto food, you know. So the balti, which was a kind of a different type of curry that was developed in Birmingham, and also the chicken tikka as well, which is a bit easier on the stomach of the UK people who don't really like that much the spicy food either. So yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. I'm a chicken.
There are some really good. Sorry, sir. I was going to talk about the handbook, but the case studies are brilliant. Okay, and I'm aware that you've already done that wonderful podcast. So if you want to get more information on the case studies up on for this unit, get on the podcast now.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. There is an hour-long podcast there with all of the case studies for this topic and all of the other topics. So go and check that out. We hope this has been useful to you in remembering some of the things and some of the really important things in UK in the 21st century. And we hope that it's useful to you in revising this session. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. It's been good fun as always.
Take care.
Bye-bye.